It's 7 o'clock, and I welcome you and thank you for coming tonight. Can you hear me in the back? Is this okay? Okay, fine, thank you. I'm Kathleen Glick, and I am with Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. I live here in Falmouth, and the group that started was, the Grandmothers group started 18 months ago by Linda Allhart. I'm going to ask Linda to come up and be with me for a minute. She started this with a letter in the Cape Cod Times, and she had quite a few people join her right away. I'll let Linda explain that a little bit, and so that the people understand who we are. You might want to get to this.
Well, it's true. Within 3 weeks, I had 20 wonderful grandmothers in my living room. After writing a letter and having it published in the Cape Cod Times, I had been with my little 3-year-old grandson the day of the massacre. And driving home from Boston, I heard this story. And the contrast between this wonderful holiday celebration with 4-year-old Colton at the time and what these children were going through was just enough for me to say enough. And I told my husband, who was driving, my life is going to change. I've got to do something. So I did write a letter. It was published. And as I say, really the rest is history. We've grown considerably. We are tigers. We are grandmother bears. We don't quit. We'll never quit. We're ferocious about our passion. I really think it's a public health issue. It's a multifaceted issue, as we're learning. But we need to find common ground. And I've always felt common sense, common ground with everybody coming together. Can we agree on safety and gun violence prevention? So we're here tonight, and thank you for the police department for being here and educating us. We'd love to work with you in any way we can. And just a thank you to Kathleen Glick from Falmouth and Nan Logan from Woods Hole back there, and Linda Lynch from Mashpee for putting this together. Thank you for being here. I hope you join our crusade. This is a good pocket down here of year-round people that we haven't touched yet, so I hope you join us, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I put a little PowerPoint together, but I just want to say something before I start. I was not an original member with Linda. I didn't hear about it until afterwards, but I am a Sandy Hook survivor's grandmother. My grandson was hidden in a closet for an hour by the music teacher with his class. We're lucky. We're lucky. He was found in an hour, but my daughter and son-in-law did not know at that time what was happening. My daughter and son-in-law buried 5 friends' babies that week of the 20. Sandy Hook is forever changed. It is the air they breathe there. It's a tragedy that keeps on giving, unfortunately. I feel like I couldn't do anything to take away the pain for my family, and so the only thing I could do really was to try to become active in something that I felt might be preventative for these kinds of things. By profession, I've been a special educator for 30 years. I have worked with the types of kids that Adam Lanza was. When this happened, I said to myself, besides the shock and the horror of everything, I said, what happened? How did he slip through the cracks? Why wasn't this prevented? And it's such a complex answer that I am not going to try to go into that. I really wish that I could share with you the conversation I had with my daughter this afternoon. But I can't, because it's way too private, way too personal. But the heartache that is there, and listening to her today, knowing how my family has gone through counseling, continues to, and what their friends are going through, I just want to say it could have happened here. I think about the little North Falmouth school That's how you had to get off track to get to Sandy Hook Elementary School. It wasn't like T-Ticket or East Falmouth, where it's right there on the road for somebody to go into. It's hidden away. And for that to happen, it could have happened anywhere in this country. And as you know, I'm sure all of you were horrified by it and still are. And it seems that we continue to have more and more of these events, and we need to work together, whether we're gun owners or not gun owners. That's not our position. As Linda would tell you, we're not against guns. That's not our position. We're not against the Second Amendment. We are against violence with guns. And I have to also say, just as an aside, I grew up in a household with guns. My dad was an NRA member. He carried that sticker on his car proudly, okay? And I know what that is, to have that as part of your culture. And it wasn't the kind of thing that it is today. It just wasn't. It didn't have that sort of feel to it, and I don't want to get into dissing people, but I'm just going to say it was a different type of organization at that time. So I'd like to start here with this to try to keep me on track, out of respect for you all and also for Police Chief Dunn and Collins and Captain Reed for giving up their time this evening, especially Captain Reed, because I messed up the time for him and he had to leave his dinner, and he came earlier than necessary. So one of the reasons that I have the others highlighted like that is because we are not just grandmothers. We want others with us. Men, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, cousins don't have to have children, don't have to have grandchildren, but we would like to know that we could grow this end of the Cape. There are a lot of people here, and we really would like to have you join us. What we're talking about tonight really are effective strategies to help reduce gun violence. And I took a quote from a lady who's in our group in Kansas City. Her name is Stacy Newman. She's a Missouri State Representative. And this was after the Kansas City shooting at the Jewish Community Center. And I think it's a compelling quote. It is easy to think nothing preventable can be done and then do nothing. Like Linda, I said to my husband within 24 hours, Larry, I have to be involved in doing something about this. You don't, but I do, because I feel like we are all complicit in this because we have been complacent. We have let this go. We have let too many things go by the board, and I believe that by ignoring it, that's the way I looked at it. So what are the starting places for reducing this violence? Obviously, dialogue. We need to move beyond arguing and out-shouting one another and trying to just have quips from the news and so forth. We've got to move beyond denying that there's a problem of gun violence in the country. We can't be saying things that we aren't well informed about. When I thought about this today, I thought, you know what, I'm not left and I'm not right. I'm concerned. I'm in the middle. I am concerned. It isn't a politician's point of view that's driving me. It's a passion for what happened to my family, and I don't want it to happen to yours. And so that's why I feel that we have to look at this. And we know the denial of the problem can sometimes be it's not the gun, it's the person. Yes, but the gun that's used has the lethality that we have seen in these mass shootings. And that's part of the problem. If we stay in a paralysis about this, we're just in a quagmire. We'll have the same knee-jerk reactions each time this happens, and we're not going to move ahead. We're not going to do anything coming together. I think grassroots, we should be the ones whose voices are saying, this is our community. We don't want this to happen in our community. And what can we do about it? So trying to tie this together for you also. So gun violence prevention literacy, all right. Having been a special educator, and still I do work in that field down in New York with disadvantaged and abused kids, the literacy thing is a big thing to me. When you talk about reading the research about the issues, you really need to get on the sites that aren't political. You need to get on the health data sites for public health. Duke has an excellent one. Johns Hopkins has one. Harvard Public Health. The Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. The Gun Violence Policy Center. We've got state and federal reports and obviously laws. If we're reading these things and knowing the primary sources, we're forming our own opinions, which gets me to educating ourselves here. If we are researching, then we should be able to recognize the facts before we align with a group or a talk show host. I think that we have to know where we stand, where we feel about something. And I think that we have to develop that by thinking critically, not by thinking that this person said it, so I'm going to follow him. I had a young mother talk to me a couple weeks ago here in town that I just met at something with the Falmouth Enterprise. And she said, I've never heard of your group before, but I would certainly be interested in it. She said, I don't understand why people aren't joining these groups more and getting involved. She said, but what I think is happening is that people don't want to be judged by a particular group. They don't want to be looked at as belonging to, oh, well, I'm left, I'm right. And I don't know if her point of view is fair, accurate, or whatnot, but it struck me. And that's one of the reasons I think that if we don't critically think about this gun violence issue, if we don't look at it and come up with our own opinions and try to help work to solve the problem, we're just sitting back and letting things continue to happen. And I think our voices are more important than that. Identifying the problems is so key because it's going to lead us to the solutions. And we all seem to agree on the mental health piece, on the need for good mental health services in our communities to help with stigma reduction, to recognize suicidal behaviors, recognize violent behaviors. We know that the problems are illegal guns on our streets. We know that there are straw purchases. We know that there's been problems in our own state not reporting to the NICS for those who should be on the NICS database about who shouldn't have a gun, who isn't supposed to be owning guns. And so when we look at this, identifying the problems, takes me back to my kids who are in their early 40s, and I look at it and I think, what did we worry about? We worried about them going off on their bikes. We worried about them playing with matches, or their first time being introduced to, driving, or hoping that they weren't into drugs and alcohol, trying to guide them. But now we're worrying about movie theater shootings, and mall shootings, and school shootings, and just about any other place you can think of. Look at Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, with the police officers having their lunch. I mean, we're talking about this as if this is a norm that we just can't do anything about. When I first got involved in this, a very good friend of mine said to me, why bother? Because it's always going to be the same. You're not going to do anything about it. You're not going to change this group or that group. And I found that hard to process. One of the problems that we see in our society today are the types of weapons that were never there before. And that's become a big issue, especially the lethality of that. The other thing, I didn't worry about asking people if there were unsecured guns in the home where my kids were going for a play date. I don't think you did either. And that's become something that we have to do. Our children have to do that because they have to care about the safety of their kids. A lot of us in here were on a call about the Ask campaign, that Asking Saves Kids, and they were stressing this about parents asking their friends' mothers and fathers. And I called them back the next day and said, you forgot to talk about the parents asking for their youngsters who are becoming babysitters for the first time, right? The babysitters. I used to call up and say, I'll be available if there's a problem, we're home, you know, don't worry, we're close by, etc. I have a friend in this room whose daughter was babysitting and there was a gun in the house and they found out about it later. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, it's a different time. And the violent videos, another problem. It is another problem, definitely. So when we look at mental illness, that's no different from country to country. We all have our percentages of the mentally ill. It's whether or not they have access to really lethal weapons and are they getting services. Our communities need to make sure that we do something about this so that we are helping. And as I said, the types of guns, they really belong in the hands of our trained law enforcement and military, the types of military-style weapons. They are not hunting guns. Those are not. No, I've talked to gun owners that are friends. They would never take out these military-style weapons to go after deer. Really. I mean, so we can't get hook, line, and sinker on that we're taken in on that. As far as avoiding the polarized politics there, I think I've kind of addressed that. I don't think we can take ourselves and put ourselves on an end on this without knowing what's our own opinion about it. Where can we come together for common ground to try to solve this? Community responsibilities. We are all stakeholders. There shouldn't be any justification to look the other way. Well, it's not my kids, I'm not. Well, we weren't involved. Well, that was at Sandy Hook. Well, they need to move on. Or no situational ethics. We have to have moral compasses about what is right for the greater good in our communities. And as I said, no polarizing politics. Richard Martinez, the father of Chris Martinez, who was killed in the Santa Barbara Isla Vista shooting. You all know him because he was grieving on TV, and he was the one who was saying not one more. But if you look at this quote of his, this is exactly how I felt when Sandy Hook happened. I think back, why didn't I pay much attention to this subject before? Other people were losing their kids. And then he says, well, we're all responsible. And that's how I felt. Like, Larry, why were we only crying about this and feeling badly for the Virginia Tech folks and all of the others around the country in the Columbine? Why weren't we speaking up? And so I hope that my message comes to you as sincere about common sense reasoning and working together, not politics. It isn't the politics. And so when we talk about what are our community responsibilities and what are measures of action we can take, these are some of the things that we're going to go over. Hopefully we won't keep you past time to go to Ben and Bill's or Smitty's for some ice cream, but I'd like to introduce Captain Brian Reed from the Falmouth Police Department. He's going to explain one of the measures that we have already in place for being proactive about reducing gun violence. Thank you, Captain.
Thank you, Kathleen. Hi, folks. Thanks for coming tonight. As Kathleen said, I am Captain Brian Reed, Falmouth Police Department, and I'm just going to give you a quick confessional. When Kathleen first came to my office and said she wanted to talk about gun violence reduction, I was a little apprehensive as to what direction we were going in. I let her know up front that I'm not a native-born Cape Codder. I was a transplant. I'm a hillbilly from Virginia, and we found some common ground there because her father was from just down the road in Stanton, Virginia. In fact, that's the town that some of you folks might remember a band called the Statler Brothers. Harold and Don Reed of the Statler Brothers are my father's cousins. So there you go. I'm almost famous. So Kathleen and I found some common ground, and we agreed up front that we were having a discussion about responsible gun ownership, and that's a position I believe firmly and personally. I'm not speaking for the chief; he'll speak for himself. So I'm coming to you today to talk to you about the Cape and Islands Consent to Search program. So it kind of makes sense up front to explain to you what that is. Consent to search essentially means folks in the community will invite the police to come into their home without a warrant to look for something, in this case, firearms. And in exchange for that, we'll take what we find and we will leave. Nobody gets arrested, nobody goes to jail, nobody gets prosecuted. It's a collaborative effort to help ensure everyone's safety and everyone's peace of mind. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what the Consent to Search program was designed around. I was a grad student with Curry College. We started in 2012, just graduated this last May, excuse me. And we started in 2012, and then of course in December 2012, the tragedy in Connecticut shook the world, and gun violence again got to the front of everyone's discussion. We were at the same time trying to come up with ideas for a cohort project, a capstone project for our master's program, and so we very naturally started to focus on gun violence reduction strategies. We started researching various ideas that had been tried in different places, and one of the programs that really jumped out at us as having a lot of promise was the Consent to Search program that was developed in St. Louis. St. Louis, large urban area, had a major juvenile gun violence crisis, and they developed a Consent to Search program to try to address it. How it came to exist was there was a community meeting much like this, and a police sergeant was standing at the front of the room saying, folks, we know where the guns are, we know where the problems are, we just can't go there because we can't get a warrant. And one of the mothers just walked up to him and said, why don't you just knock on the door and ask him? And he said, why don't we? And that's how Consent to Search was born. It showed a lot of promise in St. Louis. Ultimately, it was it met its demise due to some political pressures, but that's how the whole idea got started. Just kind of think out of the traditional law enforcement box and try to work with the public, with the community, collaboratively. Our particular team comprised, there were 12 grad students. Of them, 6 were law enforcement officers on Cape Cod, and one is works in the juvenile clerk's office in the Barnstable District Court, as well as one other citizen who just lives in Falmouth. So we were kind of already familiar with what juvenile gun violence looked like on Cape Cod. We knew it wasn't a big problem. We knew it wasn't certainly an epidemic, a crisis like you would see in St. Louis or Boston or any other urban area. But that was fine, because we wanted to look at developing a program that was going to be proactive, that was going to get in front of these types of things and hopefully prevent the next Newtown. We reached out to the Cape Cod Law Enforcement Council, the chiefs of police, and to the district attorney's office, and we found that their feel for the issue, for the problem in Cape Cod, was very similar to what we suspected and similar to what the data inevitably showed us, is that we weren't dealing with a crisis. We were doing exactly what we had hoped to do, which was to get in front of a problem before it emerged. Very happy to say that, much to our surprise, we expected to get 2 or 3 communities to sign on. We expected certainly Falmouth and Mashpee to sign on. We expected probably Barnstable to sign on, maybe Yarmouth, some of the more progressive towns, or the towns that have bigger issues with, more active police departments. But what we found was all 15 chiefs of police on Cape Cod signed on to this program, and we were frankly stunned and amazed, very pleasantly so, to get that kind of response and support from the chiefs of police. I mean, remember, we were offering them nothing but our research, and they were offering us their staff, their manpower, whatever it was going to cost to implement this program as it unfolded, and to get that kind of support unanimously across the Cape, much bigger response than we ever expected. So what were we hoping to achieve with the Consent to Search program? In a nutshell, obviously, the most tangible measure of a successful Consent to Search program would have been how many guns did we recover. That's what we can count. But what we were looking at was just, instead of just raw data, each gun that we can recover, we consider possibly the prevention of a future tragedy. That's immeasurable. There's no way to quantify that. Also, outside of just recovering guns, there's an ancillary benefit of when you have concerned parents that may be afraid to see what's in their son's room, or they just want that peace of mind, they call us, we can go and we can give them that peace of mind. Hey, guess what, Mrs. Jones? Your son doesn't have a gun in his room. We'll put your fears to rest. And as a parent, I can't tell you what that would be worth to me to have that kind of reassurance. And then thirdly, and finally, and I don't want to undersell this point, I think it's huge, is that every time someone does reach out to the local police department and ask them to come in collaboratively like that, it represents the building of a trust relationship between the community and the police department. And that's from our perspective as your law enforcement servants, that's invaluable. So this program that we developed, to the best of my knowledge, is the first of its kind nationwide that would have such a broad regional impact. It's a non-urban area, and so we're hoping that we can get some positive results from it, and it's my understanding that the next group that goes through Curry College is going to be doing a project based on outcome measures on how it works. So that's the consent to search program, if there are any questions. No?
Yes.
Yes?
How does that get initiated between the homeowner and the police? Does somebody make a phone call and say, I'm worried?
Yeah, there's actually there's several mechanisms that we can reach out to you, or you figuratively. If we have information that there might be a concern with a child in your house, you may or may not know it, or you can just call us and say, hey, I'd like to talk to someone about this consent to search. No problem. Let me get you someone.
How about a school teacher who might overhear kids?
School teachers can make referrals. We're school resource officers in all the high schools and junior highs in most of the towns. Guidance counselors. We can take referrals from a number of sources, but we never would impose ourselves. We would reach out to the parents and say, hey, this is what we hear, this is what we have this service, we'd like to offer it to you. So.
During the search, do you also look for drugs?
No, we're absolutely not using the consent to search program as a pretext for an invasive search. That type of approach would absolutely kill the intent of the program and undermine all the good that we're trying to do.
So even if you see, while you're looking for the gun,
If we see,
and even if you see the drugs?
great question. If we see something like that, we would certainly take it. We can't leave it there. A small quantity, 16-year-old has a little bit of marijuana in his book bag. We're not going to arrest that kid. We're not going to charge him with anything. Now, if there's a large quantity, if there's a meth lab, or if there's a large quantity of heroin, and we're obviously going to seize that, and we're going to have a discussion with the district attorney about how we're going to proceed with that. But small quantities of personal use drugs, no, that we would never compromise the program for that.
Do you ever have a situation where a parent invites you in, however the young teen is present and does not want you to go through his room, and what happens then?
I could certainly foresee that happening, and that's okay, but the parent is in control. The parent has the constitutional authority to grant or rescind that consent, and can rescind the consent at any point during the search, and we'll just back off and leave. So, there was another question over here.
How many consensus searches have you conducted?
Falmouth so far hasn't had any requests for a consent search, so we're hoping to build some more interest with this presentation tonight. So
it's a new program?
it is a very new program, yeah.
And so just in the last month or so?
No, it actually, it took us a lot longer to develop it than we anticipated. So the first memorandum of understanding between the chiefs, the DA, and the school actually expired shortly after we made our rollout. So the chiefs, they signed an extension to roll it for another year. So we're about a month into that.
How do you publicize it?
There were press releases sent out to local media outlets. I think Mr. Houghton from the Cape Cod Times can attest to that. I'm in Falmouth Enterprise. I apologize. How did I do that? Anything else? Okay, then I am going to surrender to Chief Collins.
To just elaborate a little bit on what the captain was talking about, the consent program. It went back and forth amongst the chiefs and the DA's office for a little while, and it certainly lasted a little bit longer than we anticipated. But we finally got everybody on the same page, and I would just supplement that we had all Cape Towns in Nantucket, so it's a total of 16. And obviously, to elaborate on the point that was made, I think, over in this corner, there's no reasonable expectation of privacy for the juvenile in the house, and it's all geared towards juveniles. So the adult calls Falmouth PD, Mashpee PD, or whoever, and says, I would like this room checked, and we check it, and if there's something there, it'll be seized, and the DA agreed that that person will not be charged with a crime for the possession of the gun itself, but it does not include if there's the commission of a crime involving that gun. But with that in mind, I just want to thank the Grandmothers Against Gun Violence. I appreciate and respect your passion and everything that you bring to the table. I know I've had a couple conversations in Mashpee with the folks who are involved in this, and your true passion always impresses me, whether it be in person or whether it be via email or on the telephone. And I think the point was driven home just a few moments ago when, and I made a note of it, it was referred to as common sense and common ground, because that's really what it's all about. It's not about the political arena. It's not about this. It's not about that necessarily. It's about that common sense and common ground approach, because what's legal and what's illegal is not always what's responsible versus irresponsible. And sometimes it's difficult to teach that sense of responsibility that we need to carry. When we see unusual behavior, when we see suspicious behavior, instead of ignoring it, bring it to the professionals, whether it be a psychiatrist, a psychologist, whether it be the local law enforcement agency. I think it's critical to have a risk assessment. If a child is believed to have access to guns and constantly keeps his or her bedroom windows all boarded up or covered up, and they seem to be withdrawing, and there seems to be issues, instead of ignoring it, it's the responsible thing to do something about it. And philosophically, there will be great debates regarding gun control and constitutional rights, and I respect the Constitution, and law enforcement officers are sworn to uphold the Constitution. However, we as a civilized society need a reality check. And the ultimate question is, can we do better? Because that's really what a lot of these forums are all about. When I started in law enforcement 34 years ago, I never thought that I would be standing here 34 years later thinking, is it safe to enter a high school? Is it safe to enter a college campus? Is it safe to enter a movie theater? Is it safe to enter a shopping mall? Is it safe to enter an elementary school? The challenges for law enforcement vary, from gun violence to substance abuse to mental illness. Chiefs yesterday at our meeting unanimously supported Project Child Safe, which is endorsed by this group. And we intend to contact the officials that are linked to this offer and collect the necessary gun locks to be made available for each agency throughout the Cape, so nobody can say, gee, I didn't have a gun safety locking mechanism. And while I'm at it, I will quote the existing Massachusetts general law, and I may have to put my glasses on in order to do it. Weapons stored or kept by an owner under Chapter 140, Section 131L. It shall be unlawful to store or keep any firearm, rifle, or shotgun, including but not limited to large capacity weapons or machine gun in any place unless such weapon is secured in a locked container or equipped with a tamper-resistant mechanical lock or other safety device properly engaged so as to render such weapon inoperable by any person other than the owner or other lawfully authorized user. For purposes of this section, such weapon shall not be deemed stored or kept if carried by or under the control of the owner or other lawfully authorized user. And the other Massachusetts general law that I wanted to cite was Chapter 140, Section 131C, carrying a firearm in a vehicle. No person carrying a loaded firearm under a Class A license issued under Section 131 or 131F shall carry the same in a vehicle unless such firearm, while carried therein, is under the direct control of such person. And speaking of laws, I promised that I would be discussing the Chief's firearms position paper, and it kind of merges into a bill that just recently came out in the Speaker's office. Magazine capacity. The current Massachusetts law restricts large capacity magazines to 10 rounds. The current restriction strikes a reasonable balance between public safety and allowing a lawful gun owner to protect himself and his family. Under firearms identification cards, current Massachusetts law sets parameters for those who wish to carry a handgun or possess a rifle or a shotgun. Beyond those parameters, however, a chief of police may deny a license to carry to someone that he finds to be unsuitable. No such allowance exists for a firearms identification card. As a result, a person who may have been arrested several times without having been convicted, or who has a mental illness without having actually been committed, must be granted a firearms identification card. In other words, a chief of police is unable to deny an FID card based upon suitability. And I will elaborate on that in just a moment. Access to mental health information. Currently, the police only have access to mental health information if the applicant was actually committed to a state-run institution. However, some patients are committed against their will for evaluation without ending up at a state institution. There is currently no mechanism to capture those cases. A database of so-called Section 12 commitments for emergency evaluation should be created for the sole purpose of vetting firearms licenses. We would like to see all medical personnel mandated reporters for patients that are a threat to themselves or someone else. This is a position paper by the executive board of the Massachusetts Chiefs, and it was fully endorsed. Firearms safety classes. Currently, Massachusetts residents must complete a firearms safety class before being granted a handgun license. However, these classes do not actually require the applicant to fire a handgun. The safety class requirement should be upgraded to include live fire. The Massachusetts Chiefs of Police are in favor of this. Current Massachusetts law requires that a resident obtain an FID card before he or she can carry OC spray. By eliminating chemical sprays from the definition of ammunition, there would be no need for restricted FID cards. At the present time, we can only find one other state that requires a permit for chemical sprays. And there was recently some debate on this issue on the premise that OC spray should be available for situations involving potential threats. There are currently two separate lists of approved firearms in Massachusetts. Approved weapons roster and the Attorney General's regulations. This dual system causes confusion and should be eliminated. In terms of consistency with federal law, many Massachusetts firearm laws run contrary to federal law. These inconsistencies are confusing to lawful gun owners and police officers. Wherever possible, these inconsistencies should be eliminated. And restoration of rights. Some Massachusetts residents can have their right to possess a firearm identification card restored if 5 years have passed following their felony conviction. This provision, however, runs contrary to federal law, which prohibits a convicted felon from possessing a firearm. Ammunition components. Currently, definition of ammunition lists each component of ammunition separately. The proposed new definition of ammunition refers to a cartridge consisting of a case, primer, propellant, and bullet. And in terms of the Class B license, a Class B license allows the licensee to carry a non-large capacity firearm, and that firearm may not be concealed. Massachusetts is not a state where people routinely carry their firearms on their hip like the Wild West and in the open. As a result, only a small handful of Class B licenses are issued in any given year. The Class B license serves no purpose and should be eliminated. Firearms on school grounds. This proposal would increase the penalty for a firearm on school grounds from 1 year to 2 years and make this crime an arrestable offense. 90-day grace period. There is currently a 90-day grace period for license holders if they start the renewal process prior to the expiration of their LTC or FID card. Due to the large number of license renewals and new applicants, the state cannot stay within the statutory time frame to issue these licenses. This grace period should not have a time frame, and the LTC or the FID card should stay active until the license holder receives their new license. The Firearms Committee was in favor of extending the grace period. And suitability. In terms of the FID card and the license to carry, to put it bluntly, if somebody comes in for a license to carry, they may have a statutory disqualifier, or the chief, in his or her discretion, can say, I feel that you're unsuitable because of blah, blah, blah. The chief is not the final arbitrator of the circumstances. Essentially, if you don't like the decision of the chief, you can appeal it to the local district court. And the local district court can uphold the chief's decision or overrule that decision. In the FID card, there is no unsuitability factor, as I previously mentioned, and the chiefs feel that that has been a problem. Now, I don't want to take up any more time up here, but there has been a lot of discussion recently in the press and the print media and the electronic media relative to the Speaker's committee's report. And to be perfectly honest with you, I do not know where some of those stand at this particular time. I should know, but I do not know. So that's an overview of the chief's position. And the only reason why I'm here articulating it is because I do serve on the executive board to the Mass Chiefs, and I do appreciate my colleague and friend, Chief Ed Dunn from Falmouth, who serves this community very well, and I'm pleased to have been here to have an opportunity. So if there are any questions.
Yes. What is the difference between a license to carry and a firearms ID? Those differences?
Typically, your FID card is going to be for your rifle or shotgun, a hunter, and a person that is carrying a pistol or a revolver for personal protection that wants to keep it on his or her person is going to need a license to carry, in a layman's terms.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chief, on the consent to search, you person is of legal age, and let's say they're 18 years of age, and their parents say, come do it, we'll give you a consent to search, you automatically can confiscate the weapon?
I think the statute I referenced was in pertaining to guns. What you're referring to is consent to search, which is an agreement amongst all of the chiefs, and there's a designee from each department that has been brought up to speed relative to the program. And essentially, as the captain said, if somebody calls and says, I suspect a gun in the house, mom or dad, it's primarily targeted to juveniles.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but what the age, is an age thing here, right?
It's if you're under 18.
Okay, but if you're 18, you can hold an FID card, correct?
But what I'm saying is, we're not gonna come into that person's home if they're an adult. The consent program is only for juveniles.
Okay, so that's under 18.
Yes, sir.
Well, again, my point is that someone can be 15 years of age or 16 years of age and have a firearms identification card. And what you're saying, the parents have the authority to allow the police to search with no warrant and can confiscate the gun?
I'll field that question. Where's it coming from?
In the back.
Okay, yeah. No, we're not looking to take lawful guns out of homes. We're looking for illegal guns. These are guns that the parents have not consented to be in the home. No one's licensed to have the gun. We're trying to take it out of the environment to make the community safer. It's not about taking weapons away from lawful gun owners. That's not at all it.
So you don't have, there's no way you can force, if they have a license, an FID card in this case, even as a juvenile, right? That's where I'm getting at. How do you split this out?
We're not forcing anything. What you gotta keep in mind is, this person, wherever it initiates, would be contacting us,
Yes,
and we would respond to the request.
right.
And presumably, the person that is granting the consent has the authority to do so, and that would be evaluated by us. If the person doesn't have the authority to grant the consent, then all bets are off.
Yeah, and these are great questions. These are discussions we had when we were developing the program. We have absolutely no interest in imposing ourselves in situations where we're not welcome. We're not trying to, if there's an 18-year-old or someone who lawfully has something, then that parent doesn't have the standing to give us the permission. We can't do that.
Okay, that is the answer.
Right.
Thank you.
And keep in mind, this program is designed to just remove the gun so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands or remain in the wrong hands. If it's already in the right hands, legally, that's
Okay.
not a problem. It's when the gun is there unlawfully, the parents suspect it's there, and moreover, the parents don't want to go in there and remove it themselves, they want us to do it. Is that?
That clears it up, thank you.
Yes.
Speaking of illegal guns, right, I'd like to turn it, because you guys are the guys that I trust on what's happening in the court system too.
I'm gonna get Chief done up here, because he's the
Okay.
local chief. Come on up here. Come on up here.
Going to somebody else now. Here's the question, because we're talking about illegal guns, and I know when we're talking about illegal guns or people that promote gun rights, the Second Amendment, they're always telling us that, it's the criminals that have the illegal guns, you're getting the responsible gun owners. But my question to you is, when you go to court and there's illegal guns, like a kid, right, a punk, or somebody, right? Do you see them enforcing that law that's the 1 year you're sent away, or not? And can you join us, right, in trying to enforce the court systems, to enforce the laws that are on the books? That's what I would like to ask. Or do you just back off?
He's saying, why
Is
did
he
you give me
stunned?
up here?
Yeah,
Is he stunned by this question?
can't-
I don't know.
again, the 1-year mandatory are on the books, but the judges are the ones who impose the sentence.
Well, why can't we put pressure on you and I, our organization, and the police, those 16 communities, to do something about enforcing? Because if you send a kid, a juvenile, to jail for 1 year, they'll think again before getting that illegal gun. That's my belief. I could be wrong. I'd like to send them away for 2 years. But you know what? They turn into punks. Oh, here, they're all coming up.
Are you gonna join too? Yeah. Well, and again, I'm not gonna,
Wowee.
The battle lines are drawn.
yeah.
I'm going to jail now.
No, and it's a good point what you say. I mean, there's a lot of things going through the courts that people don't like. And I'm not gonna say judges don't sentence people to court, to the sentence. But there are other circumstances involved in the sentencing, other than just the words and that are put out there. They have to look at, you know, they look at their histories and everything else that goes along with it.
I'm just gonna say one thing that I think is critical to this organization, and it's relevant to the question. Recently, there was an incident in Mashpee in which a gun was used in the commission of an alleged crime. Bottom line, this organization, through our detective squad, is monitoring what happens to that case. If this is done each and every time there is a gun incident and you find out what the end result is, what do you now have? A database or a collection of information, and if in fact something has run afoul, whether it be on the police end, the court end, or wherever, in prosecution, wherever it may be, you're gonna have the data because folks like this are doing the homework.
Not only folks like this, but I'm just trying to tell you, I'm Vice President of Grandmothers Against Gun Violence, #1.
Yep.
A founding member. But what I want to tell you, we decided that one of our mandates would be to go into the courts and seeing how they function. So we followed that Zinoff trial. We followed the Zinoff trial, and we were at the Zinoff court, at the Barnstable court, every day following that trial to make sure that he was put away properly, of course. And he was. So I'm telling you that we will take more of those issues and go to court and make sure that the rules are enforced. So that's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
just kind of touch on some of the issues that you brought up. I think you'd find it very difficult to find law enforcement professionals who don't advocate holding people accountable. That being said, you know, across the country on various issues, there have been mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines proposed. There have been 3 strikes or outlaws, things like that, tried everywhere. And the data continually, repeatedly shows they're not particularly effective at reducing recidivism. They don't help address the problem. They make you feel good when you make the law, but it doesn't work on the underlying causes. What does work is this: communities coming together and trying to problem solve issues together. Think outside the box and work collaboratively. Get moving, just like Kathleen said, away from the politically polarizing arguments and just look at, hey, how can we find some common ground to make this better?
But do you understand how the opposition, how they bring that up about enforcing the laws that are already in the book? And we'd like to have something to say that the laws are being enforced as we see them, and we really can't say that, because you're right, there's mitigating circumstances when a poor little kid comes up at 14. But having an illegal gun when they're like juveniles and they're coming up to court, I honestly believe if we were better, you know, enforcing that rule, we could make.
I think definitely early interventions are our best bet to help reduce these types of issues. I don't think putting 14-year-olds in jail for a year is the right solution, but I think that we can definitely get involved and find smart answers.
Okay.
In most of the cases that I can think of in Falmouth where we've had illegal guns, they have done time.
Okay.
So,
Well,
I
that's
mean,
all
I'm
I-
not, and that's why I say I can't answer for
Yeah.
all the cases that are,
Okay.
you know, like I say, mitigated circumstances.
Okay.
But this is similar to what Mothers Against Drunk Drivers did when OUI. I mean, that hasn't gone away either, but, you know, being responsible, being there and supporting.
Right.
This gentleman here,
You know,
Ken.
I know, you know, I guess everyone's aware of, there's been these unsolved murders in Falmouth and Nashville. But, question I wanna ask is, when I pick up the newspaper every day, it seems like, I don't know the statistics, I don't know, but maybe you do. It seems like in East Falmouth and Hyannis, you seem to, there seems to be more violent assaults, people, for lack of better words, losing it. What do you look at the, what do you look at the causes of that? Is that a problem of generational thing, of people been living, people having feuds with each other, or just kind of, you know, man versus woman, domestic violence, or just people because they're having a very bad day, they just decide to.
Man, I'm gonna tell you, if we can answer that question,
Yeah.
we'd be out of work.
Okay, but maybe you can answer this one question. Here's the question I pose. Why so much do you think it seems to be focused on East Falmouth and Hyannis? Can't answer.
It's not, it's everywhere.
Okay.
You may just be thinking East Falmouth,
Okay.
it's all over town. It's a lot of what you said. It's domestic violence, it's people that aren't getting along, it's neighbors that aren't getting along, it's family members that aren't getting along. As to the reason why, that's for somebody else, because I don't have those answers.
I agree with the captain. If we could answer that, would probably be in higher paying jobs. But I will say this, I will say, to piggyback onto what Chief Dunn said, I don't think it's just a local issue. I think it's a regional issue. I think it is a state issue, and I think it's a national issue. I don't think it's just local, but what I will say, and I don't know if these gentlemen would agree with me or not, but I think probably some link in some way or another seems to be substance abuse in the majority of our crimes, whether it be guns, whether it be violence, whether it be the robbery, or something of a violent nature. What is the common denominator that we always seem to see? It's always substance abuse of some sort. It's either the substance abuse individual who's trying to get money, so he's robbing, or something else is going on behind the scenes between drug dealer versus drug dealer in these little turf battles.
Well, I hope, the latest story within the last week or so about the meth lab. I mean, I lived in the Northwest, and I know it was very bad there. Reasons, I don't know, but like, houses, apartment buildings would become meth labs, just people would be moving into rooms, or houses would be renting, and then you would have a meth lab appear. And as the papers say, it hasn't hit the East Coast that much. There's been a few arrests or incidents on the Cape, but that's a real problem. It's probably as worse, if not worse, than heroin. And
When we
that's
started
pretty
seeing the meth, when Barnstable started seeing the meth, there's 3 crime unit down in Main Street in Hyannis. That's what really clued us in that it was an emerging problem, and we were obviously extremely concerned about that, because we've been very fortunate in this region, it hasn't been that big of a problem. So we had to make pretty quick work of that investigation, and we were able to, fortunately, put it together quickly and get a positive resolution. So.
But again, it isn't just Falmouth or Barnstable. It is New England. And I'll go back a little bit to the opiate forum that we had. I mean, the State of the Union address in Vermont, the governor opened up that with the opiate problem. It's New England. It's the country. It's everywhere. And it is all attached, it seems, to substance abuse.
So some of you might have the opportunity to be at the public forum on opiate abuse that the chief MC over on there. So I mean, it's a problem everywhere. It really is.
Yes.
I just wanted to say believe it was the end of March, Grandmothers Against Gun Violence sponsored a forum in Dennis, and we invited a community activist from Boston who brought 3 or 4 gang members, all of whom had been involved in gun trafficking and had been incarcerated, one for murder, to speak about the causes. And of course, again, you know, it's gun trafficking, it's poverty, it's lack of education, inner city, that kind of thing. We invited Senator Wolf, and we also invited District Attorney Michael O'Keefe. And Mr. O'Keefe's position was that the violence that you were talking about that seems rampant in East Falmouth and Hyannis, and the violence that he was talking about rampant in East Falmouth and Hyannis had to do with a lot of drug trafficking and gangs going back and forth between those 2 towns. And where you have gun trafficking and drug trafficking, you've got a formula for something really volatile, and that seems to be a big problem here. The other quick question I wanted to ask was, Chief Collins gave us a lot of good information. Is there some place we can really see that and digest it online?
I've actually provided a copy,
Okay.
and I will give you my email after the forum, and be more than happy to provide it to anybody that wants it.
Okay, great, thank you.
Could you speak a little bit about Project Child Safe, please? I think that's an interesting project that seems to be promising. Yes, we can.
A couple other things I just want to talk about real quick before we get on that is what other programs we've done here in Falmouth to keep people safe. The Falmouth Police Department partnered with the John Wesley Methodist Church a year or so ago, and again, we weren't targeting legal guns, or we were targeting guns that just in homes. They were legal guns. There were people that didn't want their guns anymore, and through partnering with them, and what they did was they purchased guns through gift cards, and that program, we got 206 unwanted guns off the street, and that's important because of the house breaks that we have across town, seasonal homes, or you may be out, and these guns that were just sitting in homes. That's when they become illegal guns. They get stolen and they use in the commission of crimes. So, I mean, we're very proud that we were able to get 206, and that is a large amount of guns to get off the street in one Saturday afternoon. We were everything. And that was a good program, but that started with a member of the John Wesley Methodist Church who brought that idea up, and Reverend Calhoun, who happens to be our chaplain for the police department, approached me and asked if I would partner with them and do that, and we did, and that was a great success. So we did that. We're going to probably do another gun buyback, hopefully sometime in the coming year, and we'll do another one and see what happens with that. The other piece that we want to keep our kids safe is the school lockdown programs that we do throughout the town. Similar to fire drills or air raid drills that some of people may have had to go through sometime. I don't know. I listened to my parents. They said they had to go through air raid drills. Okay. Well, now we do lockdown drills in the schools, and I'm really proud to say that this town takes it seriously. The schools take it seriously. We take it seriously, and the kids take it seriously. And they are well prepared to keep themselves safe should something happen. We don't want to see that happen. Another piece that I'm going to be offering to the town as a whole and the school, we just had some officers trained in the ALICE training. ALICE training came from the West Coast, worked its way, it's like everything else works its way. Meth labs work their way this way. ALICE will work their way this way also, and it's alert, lockdown, initiate, counter, and escape. It's a different way of a lockdown, but I now have 2 officers that are trained in that. We're going to be using some of that in the school, but I'm also going to offer the business community because of movie theaters, shopping malls, and things like that, so that business people can keep their employees safe and keep their customers safe. So those are some of the things that we're doing here in Falmouth to keep the community safe. And we're also participating, the captain reached out, as the chief said, we reached out for the lock program too. And all the locks that we did have at one time when they were supplied, they're all gone, but we'll get some more and we'll see if we can initiate those. But it's all about just what we said in the beginning, responsible gun ownership. I'm sorry. Other questions?
I've heard mixed
or that they were melted down. What's the scoop on that? I just don't know.
The guns themselves, okay,
Yeah.
what happened was we had a gun collector come in and look at the guns
Yeah.
to make sure that you got a $25 gift card and you might have had a gun that was worth thousands of dollars. We didn't want to see you get gypped, and guns were checked. We didn't have any classics. We didn't.
Right.
And the rest of them were destroyed.
So they were destroyed.
Yes.
And that issue came up at the executive board level of the Mass Chiefs, and there was one department, it was not Falmouth or Mashpee, but there was one department that had been selling parts that could be reused. However, I can tell you that that has been terminated, and the E-Board did take the position that if we take them through this type of a program, they should be destroyed, because otherwise we're sending a bad signal. So that was a vote that was taken, and to my knowledge, I believe that's the practice of just about every police department in the Commonwealth.
In terms of the mental illness, if you get a call and somebody is, somebody says that they're really upset and mentally ill and dangerous, perhaps, isn't it true that you really can't do much except you could get them evaluated, but you can't hold them? And in all of the, so many of the shootings that we've had, it was clear that there were problems. I mean, with all of these people, even the parents in many cases knew that. But having been a social worker, I find it very frustrating, because I would have people I knew were dangerous, and there wasn't really anything you can do until they do something. I just wonder if that's true here.
Again, believe it or not, we get a lot of calls of people that are emotional or want to hurt themselves or anything like that. And Section 12, we transport them to the hospital. We're not medical people, trust me. I'm not going to evaluate anybody, other than I know that you need to go speak to somebody and speak with a professional. And we transport people to the hospital weekly. I'm sad to say. It really is. We take them to the hospital, and then those professionals are the ones that evaluate them. They could be released that afternoon. They may be held. That's, again, up to the professionals. And does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, it does. That's the most frustrating part of this whole thing.
Well, again, and there are times that there are addresses that you'll see in the log and things like that we go there several times.
Oh, and I think your hands are as tied as, legally, until somebody really does something. I mean, I had a kid one time who said, my father, is going to attack me, and and this was in another state.
Yeah.
They said, until he does, there's nothing we can do. And I guess those are the things that are extremely frustrating, and I guess the law can't be changed to prevent it, but I find that really hard to deal with.
I'd like to address something.
I've got a question in the back first. Go
Me?
ahead.
Yeah. I came here mostly to hear about what we can do to correct this situation, about mental problems. The new legislation that's being proposed does have some parts of it, which, by the way, Gun Owners Action League, which is the lobbying outfit for firearms owners, is promoting. And I think it's going to get a good thing, because that's where we ought to go. If these grandmothers, I think, are on the right track. But since the meeting started, we've been talking nothing but guns. And by the Mrs. Fleck, is it? Fleck, sorry. In her article, she says, while the dangerously mentally ill have been responsible for most of the mass shootings are statistically rare. I suppose if you look at 300 million people, they're rare, but not to the people involved, of course. The critical behaviors that lead to most gun violence are a history of violent crime, domestic abuse, alcohol abuse, which we've got into that, substance abuse, and drug abuse. And I think we ought to stick with that. There are enough firearms laws, and the reason I know a little bit about them is because I teach the license to carry course, and I've done it for 13 years. But if I lied about my age, it's closer to 30 years. So I've sort of followed the legislation and everything else, and the impact is always blame the gun. And I know the lady says, well, that's what the NRA says. Yeah, they do. But what you gotta do is, you've gotta stop having police officers go into the local court with somebody who is violating a gun law and have a judge slap him on the wrist. And that's what's going on. Those gentlemen up there in the blue, they know what's going on. I've read about cases, I know about cases. Fortunately, unless the chief in Falmouth is not telling you what's going on, I've taught for 15 years the license to carry program. To the best of my knowledge, none of my students, with the exception of possibility of one, and I can't get the answer out of the police about what happened. None of my business, I guess. But with the exception of one, none of them have been involved in a crime or involved with that violation with that gun. Chief, if I'm wrong, Chief Dunn, you tell me I've known you long enough, I shoot from the hip, so. But I just want to move this emphasis away from the gun if I can. And you can say, well, you shouldn't do that. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to do that. Because I know from Newtown, Connecticut, I have a friend that lives very close to there, that there was a problem with the mental stability of the mother and the son. So, and I'm going to put it right out there. The mother bought the guns for that boy. The mother brought him to the range. He was introduced to AR-15s, which is the civilian version of the M16 military rifle, at a very early age. A friend of mine is very familiar with the person who owns the gun shop where the guns were bought. And there was no reticence on the mother's part to buy this guy guns and ammunition. So, yes, the gun was the thing that created the problem. But it started further back than that. You, ma'am, might have heard something that was around this subject, being close to it.
Quite a
But
bit.
people in Newtown, and I'm a former firefighter, some of the firefighters in town, they knew what the situation was. So I think we ought to get back to the mental side of this issue, because I think the guns are covered by Massachusetts law adequately.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna jump in just for a second, because I'm not the Falmouth chief, so I'm gonna respond to you.
Uh-oh.
But I will say this, and I'm not here for any philosophical debates. I'm not here for any political speeches. I pride myself on being a professional. I respect what you said, but I also respect what has been said in different circles. What I will say is a couple things beyond that. One, the grandmothers that visited me never said that they want to breach the Second Amendment. Number two, regardless of which way you feel, I think intelligent, reasonable, rational people can debate constructively as to whether or not magazines need to be and should be limited, whether or not private sales need to be and should be regulated, and so on and so forth. Now, I understand what you're saying. I respect that. But again, there are reasonable beliefs and reasonable concerns on both ends of the argument, and I'll leave it at that.
First of all, before I forget, I would like to thank them, all three of them, because it's been a privilege. And I see you agree. It has been a privilege to have them here and to get to know them and to see what they bring to our communities. It's very impressive, and we're blessed, and that's how I feel about it. And I'm sure that you do with your applause. I would, before we end, though, I would like to address a couple of things that came up, if you all don't mind. Can you, one more minute? Okay. The mental health piece that was suggested. One of the things that is, that has taken place in a couple other states, Indiana is one, and Linda Allhart and I were on a call a week and a half ago with 120 people from around the country, from the Law Center in San Francisco all the way east, Washington, all over. And one of the things that came up, which is very promising, but they need law enforcement to help go for this, is a law that would be on the books when you have the domestic abuse restraining orders come up. It would be parallel to that. And Johns Hopkins has suggested it. And that we would put in place in our states laws that would be called gun violence prevention restraining orders. Because it comes up time and time again that the mother or the father or somebody knew best, knew that something was going to happen, and that happened in many cases. When the police came to the door of the mother of the shooter at Aurora from the movie theater, she said, "My God, I knew this was going to happen." And so sometimes their hands are tied. And the states that are putting those laws in now would give law enforcement the ability to go in, almost like consent to search, knowing that there's probably guns there, that the family is very worried about the mental health crisis that's going on, and instead of having to wait till someone goes and kills, like Adam Lanza did, they could do something about it. But that's where we need you. We need you to join us, and we need to foster that kind of thing in Massachusetts. It would be something that would help law enforcement, help families that are desperate, that know that somebody's really sick and they need to get help. That's one thing that I wanted to say. I didn't want to let that go. To the other gentleman who you have done the training, I'm sorry I don't know your name, sir, but as a member of GOAL, which is Gun Owners Action League, I'm going to be a teacher for a minute, talking about the left and the right, and I said I was in the middle. I'm concerned. I think we could agree that the NRA is probably in one place, okay? And some other people that maybe want to take guns away from everybody in this country is in another place. You can correct me, but GOAL is more to the right about the gun issues. And I read your site because my feeling is I need to read my research, and today I read everything on GOAL that I could read about where they stand about certain things. Same way with this group here, projectchildsafe.org, okay? That's from the National Shooting Sports Foundation in Sandy Hook, right there in Newtown, okay? They are the NRA's trade association. Yes, it's on their website, and they explain that they are the trade association for the gun industry. They have a right to be.
Not for the NRA. You restated it correctly, for the gun industry.
For the gun industry,
NRA.
okay. But they are tied closely with the NRA as far as presenting the opinions about different things going on right now with gun legislation. Nothing against them, I'm just saying. Now, interesting that I picked up the phone and called them and spoke to them and developed a working relationship with them over Project Child Safe. And I called 15 chiefs around the state who were on, their towns are listed on the NSSF website as being participants in Project Child Safe. And I spoke to those chiefs, and that's how I got involved here, saying, it says you're a member. Do you have the gun locks? Are you distributing them? Do you need to know where to get them anymore? Because the government got rid of the funding for those those gun locks. And I was surprised that in my little informal inventory, calling up and speaking to police chiefs, that they said, we would like to have the gun locks. We have found that it's hard to get in touch to get them, okay? And they also said things to me as we got into conversations that they were not getting enough information when a chief has to issue a license to carry. That when they were doing the background checks and so forth, they're not getting enough information, that they needed more information in order to judge the suitability, whether someone needs to have a gun or not, shouldn't have it. So it was interesting to be able to try to hear what they were saying. So we got talking about this and saying, look, that's common ground, common sense, where we can come together. We can use this organization, who we're not necessarily agreeing with on most other things, to use that program of theirs to help our communities. When I spoke to the gentleman, I won't name his name, but when I spoke to him, we decided that the only thing we could agree on was the safety issue and the mental health literacy piece. He would not agree with me that this should be done. That the American Academy of Pediatrics suggests that at the wellness checkups for children, that the pediatricians ask if, non-judgmentally, not do you have, but if there is a gun in the home, is it secured and unloaded? And the gentleman at NSSF said to me, we'll never go there with you. And I said, why is that? Because to me, that is not the kind of question that is a political question. It's if you have a gun. And they said, no, 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 no. They'll start telling people they shouldn't have guns. He said, and I said, well, you know what? We'll just agree to disagree. So at least we can agree on the gun locks, and we can agree on the mental health piece in our communities, and we can agree to have communication and try to support our law enforcement in what they need, what they want, and what they need. And I'm not trying to prolong the meeting this way, but I think it's important to know that we are trying to reach across and work with others and not stick to one point of view.
I just returned from Washington, and the Brady campaign is trying to get Congress and the Senate to agree that June 21st will be ask, do you have a gun in the house? Is it safe? Is it locked up? Can my child play with your child? And if you have a gun in the house, then it is better if your child comes to my home. So that is a tremendous effort that's being pushed in Washington.
Thank you on that. And thank you very much, Ann. I was going to, no, what do I want to do here? I wanted to show you something, but I won't try to get into it. We have these in the back about the national, it's the 21st, and it's about the awkward conversations that parents have to have. And asking saves kids. We have the brochures in the back. These are for the schools. We were on a conference call about the training for this so that we got an idea of how you go about promoting this within your communities. It's a positive step. Unfortunately, it's the kind of thing that we have to start fostering, that our parents ask these things, because every week we read about children picking up guns that are unsecured in homes and being injured or killed. And we can prevent that. This is about safety and about violence, reduction. The last statistic I just want to say is Maine did a study, a comprehensive study that was released this spring from 2005 to 2010, I believe their statistics were. 66% of all of the homicides with domestic abuse and everything else, that whatever they were, 66% showed signs of suicidal tendencies before. So we know that the mental health issue is very important. And that suicidal tendency then ended up being violent with access to the gun, and that person was probably going to kill himself in most cases. It was a man in every case, but take out all these other people first in families, and then himself. So we're trying to say, yes, as you said, what's rare, what I said in my letter to the Cape Cod Times, 1% of these, it's 1% in our country that are the mass murders murders like this, 1%. But they're horrific, and you don't want them happening, and none of us do. But the others are all the domestic violence issues, and the intimate partner, and the suicides. 60% of our gun deaths in this country are suicide. And let's not forget our urban work. I mean, the gangs and so forth. There's so much. So I'm sorry if I'm going on. This is a topic that is really, what should I say? It's a passionate topic. And Margie, right?
Yes.
From Moms Demand Action. I'm sorry, Margie. I know you wanted to.
I'm a giant come lately. I drove down to the south end. My son's in the hallway doing his homework. But I have some steps that you can take if anybody wants to talk to me individually. I don't know if we're going to be kicked out at any point. We have a couple of campaigns that we're running. One is Gun Sense Voting, in which case if you want to give me your email, you will be put into a database, and you will receive, just prior to Election Day, you will receive an email with a recommendation on candidates who would be promoting and supporting gun reform.
Great.
So that's one thing. And also another, Moms Demand Action works, does a lot of corporate campaigns. We had change of policy at Chipotle and Sonic and Chili's, and currently, I just found out today we're doing what they call a Target-free weekend because they're trying to get Target to change their policies. So feel free to shop at Target, but not on the weekend. And we're going to try to make some cultural changes to influence these situations. So I have sheets that I can take your names and email if you want to get on that. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you, thank you. Linda, do we have a sign-up sheet in the back if anybody would like to join our email list and join us here? Okay. We would like to start a group here on this end of the Cape because we've had requests actually, and possibly evening for those people that work. We do meet monthly in Dennis on the first Monday of every month. We have a great web page, and we're on the Facebook. We're www.capecodgag.org, and we welcome you, and I appreciate your coming tonight. And as I know Linda does, and all the other ladies that are here from our group. We have a South Shore lady here, I see, Janet Petrella, who's starting a chapter on the South Shore. So we appreciate your coming.